Hello and welcome to Recovering from Threat. Have you ever been in a situation, maybe a conversation or a presentation or a pitch, or talking with a family member or someone was giving you feedback and something happened? You were asked a question or an unexpected comment threw you, or you couldn't believe what this person was saying, or maybe they leaned back or looked away and rolled their eyes or sucked their teeth. And in that moment, you froze and began to fall apart, and everything started going downhill from there. Well, today's training is around how can I recover from situations like that and get back into control of my brain and effective in that meeting, in that conversation. And I hope you enjoy it. My name's Stephen Lamb. I'm a business psychologist of about 30 years and I'm studying for an advanced diploma in neuroscience. And with that in mind, I'm encouraging you to be the scientist of your own experience, of your own mind and emotions. And what we're going to look at here is two things really. What happens to our brain and to our emotions when we're under pressure, when we're under stress and when things start to go wrong. And then we're going to look at a cognitive reappraisal model for helping us to be more effective within those situations. And the one that we're going to look at today is called the Lion model. And I hope you find it really useful. I remember some 30 years ago, it was my first job as a psychologist in the Met Police. I was in a meeting with some very senior people in the organisation, and I'd done my work, I'd done my preparation, and I was nervous. My brain was feeling under threat. And I was asked a question, and the question was simple, and it would have been easy to answer. And I remember the feeling of going into total meltdown, the extent to which I couldn't answer a simple or a single question that was asked. It was one of the most embarrassing moments that I'd had up to then. I look back on it fondly now, but at the moment or at the time, it was terrible. My brain lost its ability to think because it felt under threat and I was under pressure. I would have loved to have known a way to get out of that. And we've all been in situations where maybe a boss, a colleague, a customer, a patient has said something to us, maybe pushed some of our hot buttons, and as a response we've underreacted or overreacted. And 20 minutes later, after we've calmed down, we've thought of the perfect response. But we didn't have access to that response in the moment. The human brain is hardwired to spend every waking moment scanning our environment for potential threats and rewards. Since its primary function is to keep us alive and functioning, our brain is much more attuned to noticing threats in the environment than reward. When our brain detects a potential threat, it immediately goes into a heightened state of alertness, getting us ready to react. And what we don't realise is that social threats can be potentially as distressing to the brain as physical danger. And any social interaction that makes us feel disrespected, rejected, offended, unclear, unfairly treated, or backed into a corner, our brain treats the same way as if we felt unsafe in a dark alleyway. When our limbic system, our brain, our body, our emotions are under too much threat and pressure, when we're overly aroused, we have fewer resources for the prefrontal cortex to use. What was easy, say remembering a word, now becomes difficult or impossible. All of our functions, including understanding and listening, noticing environmental cues and clues, deciding, memorizing and inhibiting our baser responses, all get disrupted. Our pre-existing limitations get even worse. We're too stimulated, our resources are dealing with threat and there aren't enough left for cognitive processing. We're on automatic. Our brain is doing what it can with low resource tools, and it becomes more likely to respond negatively to situations, more likely to make negative links where there aren't any, more likely to miss stimuli and make mistakes. It's lost the big picture. Effective freewheeling and creative cognitive thinking pretty much stops. So we've gone limbic. We're not thinking as well as we could. Our memory is less effective, and we're more likely to find our attention being pulled into fripperies or irrelevancies, or to go jumping back to times and places which aren't going to help us now. Some people say, I lost it, my emotions ran away with me, and that's why it didn't work. That's why I wasn't effective. That's why I lost my cool. That's why I couldn't think clearly. And there's more to it than meets the eye. Let's look at emotional regulation. Emotional regulation are the things that we do to influence the emotions that we have, when we have them, how we're expressing them, and how we're experiencing them. And we all regulate emotions. If you have ever bitten your tongue and not said something when you wanted to, if you've ever resisted laughing because it might be inappropriate, if you've ever felt so mad at someone and wanted to give them an earful, but known that doing that would make things even worse. If you've ever felt frustrated with, say, someone giving you far too many details and you just want them to get on with it and get to the point. In all of those situations, we've been regulating our emotions. There are a number of ways we can regulate emotionally, and we're going to look at one of those. But in brief, we can modify the situation or distract ourselves. You can express what you're really thinking or really feeling, hopefully well, but sometimes not so well. We can suppress the emotion or suck it up, or we can intentionally reappraise an emotion and a situation, change how we think about it, change how we're describing its meaning to us, so that we can improve our cognitive and our emotional response to the situation, to the emotion, before that emotion and the situation runs away with us. If I go to the doctor and say, my finger is sore, the doctor might look at it and say, your finger's broken, so I need a cast. Or the doctor might look at it and say, it's inflamed, so maybe I need antibiotics. With a diagnosis, a name that accurately describes, that tells me what's going on, I can start to fix or address whatever the situation is. And a lot of people are pretty poor at diagnosing their mood or diagnosing their emotions. If you can't diagnose how you're feeling properly, then it might be hard to take effective targeted action. A lot of people can diagnose about 5 or 6 emotions: happy, sad, mad, bad, and 1 or 2 others. And that limits them, because it neither captures what they're truly feeling. Lisa Feldman Barrett talked about the concept of emotional granularity. Can you recognize how anger differs from jealousy, how joy differs from satisfaction? And people with higher emotional intelligence tend to have a wider emotional vocabulary. Anger is a feeling, but it has a lot of nuances to it. And if you can build up this granularity, you can improve your emotional intelligence. Granularity, specificity, gets to the heart of the problem and helps us to understand what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling in the moment. Emerging evidence shows that even just putting a label on your feelings is a very powerful tool for regulation. The idea is, take a state that's broad and general, like I'm so angry, and make it more specific, more precise, more nuanced. And you don't even have to say it out loud. Even to yourself works. It lessens its power, it weakens its grip on you. For example, I could say, I'm feeling vulnerable, I'm feeling exposed, I'm feeling isolated right now. I'm feeling overwhelmed. People think they'll feel worse when they say out loud or inside their head how they're feeling. But when you consciously put a name to that feeling, it actually dampens the threat circuitry in your brain. It's hard to think clearly when my threat circuitry is in charge. So labeling in the moment, if you say you feel angry in your head, you don't feel angry, you feel less angry. Your heart rate goes down, you think more clearly, it calms the brain, it dampens the threat,
and gives you more access to your cognitive processes, which is exactly what we need in that moment. The key is for it not to be a dialogue in your head. It's a short, sharp process that finds a word that describes more accurately how you're feeling. The Lion model is a simple model for recovering from threat that may help you to self-regulate in the moment. Sometimes it's good to have a little routine that you can pull out when you feel like you're flipping your lid. It's a great example of a short, sharp self-regulation checklist. And the brain loves cognitive shortcuts. But first off, I'm going to start with breathing. A friend of mine who is an expert in mindfulness says, can you take one calming breath before you freak out? And breathing is incredibly powerful for self-regulation. A calming breath gives a sense of control and choice and space. Breathe in through your nose for a count of 4. Then purse your lips and slowly breathe out. If that's all you can do, that can be hugely effective. It instantly begins to lower our heart rate, and it reduces a lot of anxiety and creates a sense of space, which is what the prefrontal cortex needs to get back into control. Let's imagine the situation is I'm a relatively junior person in a meeting. I have important knowledge to share, but I've been spoken over about 3 times and I'm starting to clam up and go into threat mode. I take a calming breath. And now I label the feeling. Probably best to do it internally because of the meeting. So I'm feeling a little bit excluded and vulnerable, perhaps. Next, get curious. That's interesting. I wonder what that's about. I remember Spock in Star Trek, whenever things were going to hell in a handbasket, he would often say, fascinating, that's fascinating. And there's a genius inside of that. It's really hard to freak out if your cognitive response is, this is interesting, I wonder what's going on, I need to get curious. O stands for origin. I wonder where this threat is coming from. And that could be it's coming from, I need some clarity, I need certainty. Or maybe it's coming because I feel quite junior in the meeting. Maybe I don't feel connected or that I truly belong in this group, or that their status is more important than mine. But origin really means, where is this threat located? Where is it coming from? If you've ever studied neuroscience, you might be aware of the SCARF model, which stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness and fairness. Might it be coming from one of those threat domains? And if you haven't studied neuroscience, then actually the question, where is this threat coming from? Where is it originating from? Is good enough. So maybe I'm thinking, this is coming because I feel junior and I feel a little bit vulnerable. And finally, new meaning. Is there another way of looking at this? Is there a better way of looking at this? Is there a more resourceful way of looking at this? Is there a better story that I can tell myself here? A way that I sometimes do this is I use the words, the story I'm telling myself. And it could have been that the story I'm telling myself is that I am junior and vulnerable. Maybe a better story could be that I've done the research, and even though I'm new, these people will want to hear this information. And that might give me enough space to speak out. I realised that I was triggered. I got curious about it. I figured out where the threat was coming from. I took my best guess as to where that was. And I worked out a better story to tell that will help me speak up and take action. I'm choosing to see the situation differently. I'm reappraising it to a more helpful and more useful way. Because let's face it, being annoyed won't necessarily help change the situation or help me be more effective. Labelling and reappraisal go hand in hand. We need to be aware of our emotional state, label it, and then choose to think differently about it. This takes practice, it takes work, and it is incredibly powerful. A brain in threat mode, a brain going limbic, might not always be the smartest thing.
Thoughts can be bullies. Let's imagine your brain is going into threat mode because you've got, say, an interview coming up. Label: I'm feeling nervous. I'm feeling a little bit anxious about this. That's interesting. I wonder where that's coming from. Or actually, it's coming from a place that I want to do really well. I want to join these people. I want to be with them. It looks like a really good job. It would be great for my career. Is there a better meaning? Is there a new meaning I could put to this? Well, actually, yeah, maybe there is. I've put the work in. I've prepared for this interview. I've practiced and spoken it through. I think I would be really good in this job and would love it. And I think they'd love to have me. And you know what? I'm employable. So if I don't get this job, another brilliant one will come up as well. And that new meaning, that actually I'm employable, I'm good enough, if this doesn't work, something else will come up, might just give my brain the space to be brilliant in the next interview. I really hope that this has been of interest to you and of use. Start small. So the next time you're preparing for something and you might be feeling a little bit worried, use the Lion model and just see what happens. The more you practice this, the better it gets and the easier it becomes. Be the scientist of your own experience and you will find loads of ways to make our brains work more effectively for us. And have a think. What's your key takeaway from today? What are you going to try and do differently? What are you going to put into action? It's been lovely chatting with you today. Take care and hopefully I'll see you soon.